Call, the Vorath commander, leaned forward, his segmented eyes narrowing in a mix of disbelief and bafflement as the tactical display in front of him shifted, revealing the newest footage of human special forces. The glowing panels, typically filled with precise movements and predictable tactics, now displayed chaos personified. Flickering holographic images showed small human units employing combat strategies so unorthodox that even his highly analytical mind struggled to grasp their purpose or, more concerning, their effectiveness. He clicked his mandibles together, an involuntary reaction to stress, and glanced at the data feed looping the same scenes of reckless human ingenuity. Absurd, he muttered, his deep voice vibrating through his chest. How can such randomness yield any success in battle? His fellow commander, HFY, stood next to him, shifting uneasily on his suction cup-tipped feet. The commander's skin, usually a robust blue-green, had paled to a sickly turquoise. HFY tilted his head, his antennae twitching in confusion. "You must admit," he replied hesitantly, "there is an unnerving efficiency in their chaos. Look at that maneuver." He pointed at the holographic screen as a group of humans executed what appeared to be a series of parkour moves across shattered terrain, dodging incoming fire with acrobatic grace. The human soldiers wore grins visible even through their visors, barking out jokes and laughter, as if they reveled in the madness. Call's tentacles curled slightly as he watched the display. "They don't just fight," he said, a shiver running down his back plates. "They enjoy it." He felt a creeping sense of dread that he couldn't easily dismiss. As a seasoned military strategist, he had spent his career studying countless species, learning their doctrines and tactics. The humans, however, defied every rule of warfare he had come to know. HFY tapped on a panel, bringing up a series of intercepted human communications. The screen erupted with audio clips of human voices, punctuated by bursts of gunfire and shouted jokes. "Ghost Recon, this is Overwatch 1," voice crackled through. "Remember, folks, style points are awarded for creativity." Another voice laughed, "Copy that, Overwatch. Hey, Jax, how about we paint flames on our drop pods next time? Make an entrance they won't forget." A third human voice broke through the laughter. "Nah, let's go with something classier. How about landing upside down?" Maximum shock value. The line ended with more laughter and the distinct sound of rapid weapon fire. HFY recoiled from the audio, his antennae trembling. "Do you hear them? They mock the gravity of combat. How can beings with so little regard for decorum be so devastatingly efficient?" His voice wavered, and he looked to Call for reassurance. Call said nothing, staring at the display as another clip played. This time it showed a human squad breaching an enemy stronghold, laughing and joking as they deployed reprogrammed maintenance drones. The drones zoomed around, playing loud and inappropriate music, turning a grim battlefield into something closer to a bizarre celebration. Yet the humans still accomplished their mission, dismantling enemy defenses with precision. How Call finally said, his voice low and strained, "Did these humans take our most advanced battlefield sensors and weapon systems designed to intimidate and overwhelm, and turn them into a backdrop for entertainment?" His tentacles writhed, betraying his discomfort. HFY sighed, his gaze shifting back to Call. "They are beyond comprehension," he agreed, his voice nearly a whisper. "Even the names they choose for their units, Ghost Recon Delta Command or Valkyrie's Furia, they seem to revel in the drama of it all. And yet..." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "These peculiarities are what make them so lethal." Call's frustration mounted, and he slammed a tentacle down on the console. "It must be psychological warfare," he reasoned, desperately seeking a logical explanation. "They confuse and disorient their enemies with their theatrics." But even he wasn't sure if he believed his own words. The room fell into a tense silence as both commanders contemplated the insanity unfolding before them. Their species, the Vorath, had always valued order, discipline, and meticulous planning. Human warfare was the antithesis of everything they held dear, and it terrified them. The holographic display continued its relentless loop, showing human special forces operating with wild abandon, seemingly guided more by gut instinct than tactical discipline. Call's mind drifted to the reports on human history, a history rich with tales of conflict, art, and, to the Vorath's horror, a penchant for turning entertainment into warfare. Human military advancements had reportedly been inspired by books, movies, and even games. The idea that humans drew lethal tactics from mere fiction was almost too much to bear. "How did we overlook this?" Tal whispered, his voice trembling. "We knew of their creativity, but we assumed it was frivolous. We never anticipated they would turn that creativity into a combat doctrine." Call's tendrils tightened, his voice hollow. "Because we couldn't imagine it," he replied. "We couldn't fathom a species that finds humor in horror, that invents names like Ghost Recon and turns orbital drop assaults into rides they look forward to." Tal gave a grim nod. "Perhaps it is time to consider retreat," he suggested cautiously, "before we learn what other surprises they have in store." Call's response was a bitter exhalation, a mixture of frustration and fear. Perhaps he admitted, though the idea wounded his pride, "But we must first understand them. Only then will we know whether retreat is our only option." Both commanders stood in uneasy silence, their minds racing to grasp the strange, horrifyingly effective tactics of the human special forces. Their disbelief lingered, but beneath it lay an even more troubling realization: humans were not just unpredictable, they were incomprehensibly dangerous. Call's mandibles twitched as he reluctantly shifted to another set of data on the tactical display, showing even more baffling footage of human special forces operations. The first scene, labeled with the humans' own ridiculous codename, "Riding the Lightning," depicted soldiers performing an orbital drop from low-orbit platforms. The Vorath commander watched as armored human soldiers plummeted through the planet's atmosphere, fiery trails blazing behind them like meteors. Instead of approaching their descent with somber precision, the humans hollered and whooped in excitement, as if they were riding some wild amusement park attraction, rather than barreling toward potential death. "Are they?" Celebrating Tal's voice trembled, antennae stiff with disbelief. He leaned in closer, his segmented eyes reflecting the bright flames surrounding the humans' descent pods. As each pod slammed into the ground, the humans emerged, weapons blazing and laughter ringing over their comms. They coordinated seamlessly, their enthusiasm palpable even amidst the chaos. Call couldn't hide his incredulity. "These are supposed to be elite warriors," he said, his voice thick with frustration, "and yet they act like children on a thrill ride." His tentacles writhed as he tapped into more feeds, watching the humans sprint across a war-torn landscape, joking about their kills, and even taking a moment to high-five one another mid-battle. But the most baffling part wasn't just the humans' exhilaration, it was how effective they were. Despite the apparent madness, their operations yielded incredible results. They outmaneuvered heavily fortified enemy units with ease, using absurd tactics that defied conventional wisdom. In one scene, a soldier hurled a repurposed drone loaded with flashbangs directly into an enemy command center, shouting, "Catch this, you overgrown squid lords," before detonating the device. The ensuing chaos paved the way for a flawless takeover. Call took a shaky breath, attempting to maintain composure. "Their doctrine. It's insanity made method," he murmured, feeling his fear deepen. "We prepare for order, strategy, and precision. They thrive in chaos." Tal glanced at Call, his expression a mixture of fear and awe. "How do they function like this?" he asked. "Our entire species prides itself on logic, yet these humans operate with no apparent logic and still prevail." Call hesitated, then initiated a briefing for the other alien commanders. "Observe," he announced, gesturing to the next set of intercepted communications. The audio crackled with the unmistakable sounds of gunfire, followed by laughter and banter. "Hey, Marcus," one human soldier yelled, barely audible over the explosions. "Bet you 5 credits I can take out that anti-aircraft turret with a frisbee throw and some C4. Another voice replied with a cackle, "You're on. Make it look cool, too." Tal's antennae drooped in sheer disbelief. They make wagers during life or death combat," he stuttered. Call's tentacles curled tightly. "Yes," he replied, barely able to conceal his growing alarm. "And not just wagers. Look at their armored transports." With a wave of his appendage, he highlighted a unit humans had dubbed Valkyrie's Fury. The vehicle was a heavily modified troop carrier, painted with flames and adorned with what appeared to be a stylized, winged skull. "They decorate their war machines," Tal whispered, aghast. 4. For fun. Call nodded. It's a psychological weapon, he reasoned, though doubt tainted his voice. Or perhaps it's just how they find joy in the chaos. Either way, it works. They have somehow turned humor and spectacle into tools of war. One of the other commanders, a tall and stately Varath named Jaranax, entered the briefing chamber. His eyes flickered from Call to KX Tau, confusion evident on his usually composed face. "You're seriously suggesting we consider retreat?" Jaranax asked, incredulous. "From a species that treats war like entertainment?" Call's frustration boiled over. "Yes," he snapped. "Because they weaponize unpredictability. They mock death and thrive in circumstances that would break even our most disciplined soldiers." He took a moment to compose himself, then added, "If we can't anticipate them, how can we defeat them?" Jaranax crossed his arms, his skin paling. "They cannot truly be this dangerous," he argued. "Surely there is a flaw in this. Madness." KX Tau, still shaken, whispered, "I fear the only flaw is our inability to comprehend them. We thought we were prepared, but they break every rule we know, and it works for them." Call's tentacles drooped, a rare sign of vulnerability. "I suggest we retreat now, before they unleash something even more confounding," he pleaded, though a glimmer of uncertainty remained. Could they really justify retreating from creatures who laughed in the face of war? Jaranax fell silent, pondering Call's words. The Vorath commanders exchanged uneasy glances, the realization sinking in humans were a threat like no other. Their tactics were a blend of chaos, humor, and lethal precision, a combination that no strategic model could predict or counter. And that was what made them so terrifying. The tactical display flickered once more, presenting yet another scene of human special forces in action. This time the footage showed a heavily fortified enemy facility transformed into an unrecognizable spectacle. The humans had infiltrated under the cover of night, but instead of executing a typical silent assault, they had reprogrammed the facility's maintenance drones. Now those drones flitted through the air, blasting dramatic, bass-heavy music from their built-in speakers, colored lights flashing in sync with the rhythm. What should have been a grim battle zone had become an impromptu rave, complete with soldiers dancing between firefights, grinning as they disarmed the terrified guards. Call's eyes widened, disbelief settling over his features. "They've turned an enemy stronghold into a celebration," he managed to say, his voice cracking under the strain of shock. The footage continued, showing human soldiers using bursts of music as cues for synchronized combat maneuvers, turning even gunfire into something resembling a choreographed performance. They leapt over obstacles with athletic grace, using their surroundings in the most unorthodox ways imaginable. One soldier slid across a polished industrial floor, firing at approaching enemies while simultaneously tossing a reprogrammed cleaning bot into a crowd of hostiles. The bot exploded in a burst of foamy industrial coolant, creating a slick, impassable surface that left the enemy floundering and unable to mount a counterattack. Another soldier used a maintenance crane to swing dramatically through the air, landing behind enemy lines with a triumphant cheer, as if he had scored a point in some intergalactic game rather than waged war. KX Tal watched the scenes unfold, his skin paling to a near-translucent hue. "They adapt too quickly," he whispered, horror lacing his voice. "Their improvisation is terrifying. Every environment becomes a playground for them." Call, equally shaken, studied the footage. The humans were fighting as if they had rehearsed for a theater performance, and yet their seemingly reckless antics were undeniably effective. "We rely on preparation, structure, and discipline," Call said, his tone filled with unease. "But these humans, they have mastered something far more dangerous: spontaneity." His tentacles curled tighter. "They turn combat into something akin to art, and their enemies become mere participants in their deranged spectacle." The Vorath commanders fell into a heavy silence, their horror deepening as the footage cut to a human camp during a lull in combat. Soldiers were gathered around, laughing and swapping stories of their recent missions. KX Tal's antennae twitched as he observed one group of humans engaged in an arm wrestling competition, while another group debated the aesthetics of their combat gear. "This," KX Tal said, his voice breaking with incredulity, "this is how they prepare for war. By making competitions out of their strength? By arguing over how stylish they look in the middle of battle." Duranax, who had remained skeptical until now, finally spoke up. It's not mere frivolity, he admitted, his voice hesitant. They bond through these rituals. They turn the grim reality of war into something bearable, even enjoyable. That camaraderie, that morale, it must be what gives them strength. KXTAL took a shaky step back, struggling to comprehend. They even compete to look impressive in combat, he continued, his disbelief palpable. As if appearances matter in the face of death, his eyes reflected a deep and growing respect mingled with fear. But it must matter to them. It drives them. Call, feeling the weight of realization pressing down on him, turned to the other commanders. They've created an entire culture around war, he explained, his voice tinged with a reluctant admiration. Their inside jokes, their obsession with style, their strange rituals, it's all part of their combat doctrine. They've found a way to thrive where other species falter. They embrace madness and make it their strength. Duranax's tentacles went limp, his usually composed demeanor crumbling. We underestimated them, he said, defeated. They are a species that cannot be broken by fear because they laugh in its face. They are unpredictable, uncontainable, and unstoppable. Call exchanged a grim look with KXTAL. It is time, he declared, his voice filled with resignation, to reconsider our involvement. If we cannot understand them, if we cannot counter them, then we must retreat. There is no honor in engaging an enemy that turns our strengths into their entertainment. KXTAL nodded, relief washing over his features. I agree, he said. We've seen enough. They turn chaos into opportunity, madness into method. We cannot hope to win against a force like that. Duranax, though proud and resistant to retreat, finally conceded. We must inform the High Command, he said. The humans are not just a military threat, they are a cultural anomaly that defies everything we know about warfare. To continue would be to invite disaster. With that, the Vorath commanders came to a unanimous, if reluctant, decision. The humans were unlike any foe they had ever faced, and their creativity was a weapon more powerful than any technology. As they prepared to withdraw from their ill-fated mission, an unspoken respect settled over the room. They had witnessed something extraordinary and terrifying. The Vorath now understood that human madness was not a flaw, but a force to be reckoned with, a force that had bested them without ever breaking a sweat. News of the Vorath commander's retreat spread rapidly through the galactic mercenary community, sending ripples of shock and awe. Mercenary groups, known for taking on high-risk contracts without flinching, began to reconsider their stance on human engagements. The message boards of the interstellar trade networks buzzed with updates and heated debates. Veteran mercenaries, some with reputations for facing the most formidable adversaries, started issuing stark warnings to avoid any mission that involved human special forces. We fought the Kragan warlords and the Tharxian swarm, wrote one well-known mercenary captain, but nothing compares to the madness of human warfare. No amount of credits is worth the chaos they bring. Another mercenary leader, whose crew specialized in planetary sieges, updated their standard contract to include a new clause: under no circumstances will we engage human combatants, especially those affiliated with special forces or exhibiting behavior considered unorthodox, jovial, or excessively creative. It was unprecedented for mercenaries to refuse a fight, but humans had rewritten the rulebook on acceptable risks. Meanwhile, rumors of a strange encounter spread like wildfire. The incident, quickly dubbed the Teton diplomacy, only served to cement the humans' reputation. On the barren, disputed moon of Ferrix, a human special forces unit had been cornered by a powerful coalition of mercenaries. Both sides were heavily armed, and the tension was thick enough to slice with a vibroblade. Yet, instead of escalating into a firefight, something completely unexpected occurred. The human commander, a tall man with a mischievous grin, had stepped forward holding a steaming kettle of tea. Gentle beings, he announced, his voice calm and warm. Before we commence hostilities, may I suggest a brief moment of tactical hospitality? After all, negotiations are best conducted with a touch of civility. The aliens had exchanged confused glances, their weapons still raised, but the human soldiers had already begun setting up an impromptu tea party. Tables and chairs appeared, complete with delicate porcelain cups and plates of small, dainty sandwiches. The humans moved with practiced elegance, pouring tea and engaging the mercenaries in polite conversation. Baffled but intrigued, the alien mercenaries hesitated, then cautiously accepted the hospitality. What unfolded was nothing short of surreal. Instead of a bloodbath, the standoff dissolved into a diplomatic gathering, with the humans discussing trade routes and mutual interests. By the end of the tactical tea service, a series of trade agreements had been negotiated, and both sides departed amicably, the potential for combat entirely averted. The story of tea-time diplomacy sent shockwaves through the galaxy, leaving other species in a state of bewildered admiration. The notion of weaponized civility was just one more example of how humans continued to defy expectations. Other alien factions began adopting some of the humans' unconventional tactics, albeit with mixed results. Reports emerged of rhythm-based warfare units attempting to use synchronized music to boost morale, but none could match the humans' natural flair for turning chaos into a weapon. In response, military academies across the galaxy scrambled to study and understand this new phenomenon. Scholars debated whether the human success was due to sheer luck or an uncanny cultural advantage. Meanwhile, human special forces continued to evolve, their influence seeping into every corner of intergalactic warfare. Tactical tea parties and music-based strategies became the stuff of legend, inspiring both admiration and terror. In the end, it wasn't just the humans' technology or their combat skills that left an indelible mark on the galaxy. It was their unpredictability, their refusal to conform to the norms of war, and their ability to find humor and creativity in the most dire of circumstances. The closing scene found Call, the Vorath commander, addressing a new cohort of recruits. His voice, once confident and commanding, now carried a note of solemn reverence. Remember this, he warned, his eyes reflecting the many horrors he had witnessed. Humans are not simply warriors, they are artists of war, mad and inspired. Approach them not with contempt, but with respect and perhaps a touch of fear. He paused, his tentacles tightening, for in their hands even tea becomes a weapon, and chaos becomes an art form. And with that, the galaxy braced itself for whatever madness the humans would conjure next. The unpredictability of their nature remained both a source of fascination and a terrifying reminder in the theater of war. The humans had mastered the role of both jesters and kings.